This is Hurricaneville's Tracking the Tropics. Good afternoon. This is the Hurricaneville Tracking the Tropics report, an overview of what's going on in the tropical Atlantic as well as the Eastern Pacific. I'm Greg Machos. Today we start with the look at the seasonal climatology, and this is based on the number of tropical cyclones per 100 years. And as you can see, we're pretty much between June 20th and July 10th. We're right about here. We're at the end of June. So usually, on average, we don't have that many named storms or hurricanes during the month of June. And then gradually it starts to ramp up as we get into late July, early August. And then we get to the peak season, which is the middle of August to the middle of September. That is the peak of the hurricane season, or otherwise known as the Cape Verde season. And then from there we have a gradual decrease with a secondary peak in the middle of October, and then things gradually fall off to the end of the season, which is usually November 30th, although we have had storms in December and even into early January like we did in the 2005 hurricane season. Well, anyway, we're going to start by taking a look at what we reported on at Hurricaneville.com. Here is the Hurricaneville blogosphere, and on here you will see the latest installment of the Hurricane Video Report. It's a YouTube video, talks about the various things going on in the tropical Atlantic, including the latest on Tropical Storm Debby, or what was Tropical Storm Debby, and its impacts on northern Florida. Talks about the flooding there, etc. We also have an article on Debby coming ashore yesterday, and again it discusses the heavy rainfall and flooding that has hit most of Florida. For those of you who haven't listened to the report yet, or haven't been paying too much attention to the tropics in general, Florida has gotten anywhere from 6 to 10 inches in much of northern Florida, with some areas getting over 20 inches. There's one county, Wakulla County in Florida, which has received, as of the last report that I saw, 28 inches of rain. And there's major river flooding in the area of northern Florida, just outside of Jacksonville along the I-10 corridor. Okay, so now we'll get to the what's going on in the Atlantic Basin, and this is our wide map of the Atlantic, and we'll first look at Tropical Depression Debby. This is the most recent advisory as of 11 a.m. On Wednesday, June 27th. This is from the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida. Maximum sustained winds are 35 miles per hour. Minimum central pressure is 1,001 millibars, or that would be 29.56 inches of mercury. It is located at 29.7 north or 79.8 west, and it is moving to the east at 10 miles an hour. Okay, and as you can see, it's kind of getting caught up here with this front that moved through or moved off the east coast on Monday night, and that should basically carry it out to sea. Now, looking elsewhere in the Atlantic, you can see mostly everything is clear. We do have some activity moving off the African coast, and we do have this tropical wave here nearing the central Atlantic. We'll get to that in a second. But we're looking mostly here at the Caribbean, the Gulf, even parts of the western Atlantic, basically mostly clear at this time. Okay, we're going to take a look at the Caribbean right now, a little bit better look, and this is image courtesy of the Weather Channel. And as you can see, again, there's some high clouds stretching out from that frontal boundary, or what's left of Debby, over portions of Cuba. There's even some stray clouds over the northern portion of Hispaniola. We even have a little disturbance here, or a little area of showers and thunderstorms that have just emerged in the Bay of Campeche region of the Gulf of Mexico, and we'll get to that in a moment. But again, the Western Caribbean and the Southwestern Caribbean, which are primary areas of development this time of year, are basically cloud-free at the moment. Now we're going to take a look at the infrared satellite loop of the entire Atlantic region, and again you can see Debby is pushing away from the Florida coast and moving out to sea. We have very little in the way of any problems in the Caribbean, as we mentioned earlier, the Gulf of Mexico. I had mentioned briefly the little disturbance here, or a little area of disturbed weather that just seems to have emerged in the Bay of Campeche region of Mexico. But right now there's no signs of any development with that. We'll have to monitor that though, because again, that region of the Atlantic, the Gulf of Mexico, Bay of Campeche, or Bay of Campeche, is a prime area for development this time of year. As we look further to the east though, we do have some disturbances. We have one that just emerged off the African coast. This is the Cape Verde Islands here, or the Cape Verde Islands. This is a small pocket of islands off the west coast of Africa, and that's where they get the name Cape Verde Storm, because many of the classic hurricanes form in this area during the months of August and September, and even in early October. Well, anyway, we have this area of disturbed weather here approaching the central Atlantic, and I'm going to try to see if I can pull up another map here. Yes, here's the map I was looking for. This is a tropical wave feature. Again, it's approaching the central Atlantic, and it's near, the pressures are kind of high in this area. The pressure, if you notice here, is 1,016 millibars, and that is approximately, I believe, it's over 30 inches of mercury. And you can see, again, the pressures are kind of high here, even going into the west coast of Africa where there's other disturbances. So we'll have to watch it. It is a feature worth watching right now. The National Hurricane Center, in their tropical outlook, has given it a 10% chance of tropical cyclone formation, and we'll give you a little bit more information on it. Tropical wave, located nearly midway between the west coast of Africa and the Windward Islands, continues to produce disorganized showers and a few thunderstorms. Development of this wave, if any, will be slow to occur as it moves westward at 10 to 15 miles per hour. This system has a low chance, 10%, of becoming a tropical cyclone during the next 48 hours. Okay, now we're going to go back and take a look at the overall Atlantic picture, and this time using the water vapor imagery, courtesy of NOAA. And again, you can see this large plume of moisture off the east coast of the United States. That's the combination of our frontal boundary and what's left of what was Tropical Storm Debby. We have a lot of dry air here in place in the central Atlantic. These are the Leeward and Windward Islands. This is Puerto Rico. This is the island Hispaniola, including Haiti in the west portion, and the Dominican Republic in the eastern portion. This is Jamaica. This is Cuba. These are the Bahamas. This is Mexico. And this is Central America, northern coast of South America right here. And again, we have our disturbance emerging here in the near about the central Atlantic, midway between the Cape Verde Islands and the Windward Islands. And again, small pocket of convection associated with it. Nothing really serious at this moment. They're going to continue to monitor it. And now we're going to take a look at what's going on across Africa. Now this satellite is courtesy of the Weather Channel, and again you see our disturbance here in the central Atlantic. Again, these are the Cape Verde Islands in this region, and then we have another wave that just moved off the African coast within the last 24 hours. Again, you're going to see waves constantly churning off the African coast this time of year. That is a common place for them to emerge. And here are some other disturbances along the African continent that are moving westward toward the Atlantic and will eventually make it into the Atlantic along the intertropical convergence zone. And some of those may develop into a depression or tropical wave, or even perhaps a storm or hurricane during the course of the weeks ahead. Now, let's see. Okay, this is a map of the various model plots, and this is usually what they call spaghetti model plots. This is courtesy of the South Florida Water Management and the National Hurricane Center. You can see the bulk of the models are basically steering this storm out to sea. We do have some models that have it taking a loop back across Florida into the Gulf and into Mississippi and Louisiana. However, that model, which I believe is one of the BAM models, is not as sophisticated as maybe some of these other model plots. We do have the Clipper, which is more of an extrapolation. It's to the left of most of the model plots, but again, that is not as sophisticated as some of the other models. Basically, what you want to look at for the consensus is the National Hurricane Center model, and then usually other models that you can kind of look at is the GFDL, the UK Met, no gaps is usually fairly good. The AVN, there are all in this model guidance here from the National Hurricane Center. Now we're going to take a look at the sea surface temperatures for this time of year. And climatologically speaking, the eastern Atlantic is not where it should be for tropical development. You can see that they are in the lighter colors, the lighter shade of reds, oranges, yellows, even greens to some extent. Meanwhile, the further south and west you go into the Western Caribbean, even portions of the Eastern Caribbean near Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, as well as the Western Gulf, those look right now as the primary area of development. Now, the thing you have to always remember is that for hurricanes to develop, they basically need three things. They need spin, which they get from the combination of the convergence of the trade winds along the intertropical convergence zone. Then they need plenty of warm, moist air, and that comes from warm ocean water. And that warm ocean water has to have a temperature of at least 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Then, on top of that, we need to have very good upper level winds. So we got to have very little in the way of wind shear. If we do have wind shear, that kind of blows off the higher cloud tops from the developing thunderstorms, and that hinders the development of these systems. So again, we're looking around, and if you take a look at the climatology for the month of June, these are basically storms that have formed in the first 10 days of June, and you can see most of them have formed in the Gulf or just off the southeast coast of the United States, particularly Florida, and then also in the northwestern Caribbean. We also have some in the southern or the southwestern Caribbean. Then as we progress through the month of June, we have more storms again in the Gulf and the northwestern Caribbean. We have more storms, or some storms, starting to form in the central Atlantic and western Atlantic, as you can see here. But again, it's still mostly concentrated in the Gulf and the western Caribbean, which is appropriate because of the fact that they have the warmer temperatures the warmer sea surface temperatures this time of year. Then we move toward the end of June, and that's where we're kind of at right now. And again, you start to see more development in the Atlantic, off the southeast coast and mid-Atlantic coast. But still, again, the concentration of the development is in the western portion of the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico. Now, we switch to the eastern Pacific, and water temperatures here along the intertropical convergence zone, if we go back to our sea surface map, you can see the waters off the southern coast of Central America and Mexico are very warm this time of year, and that is probably one reason why the Eastern Pacific hurricane season gets off to a 2-week head start on the Atlantic season because of that. Now, as you can see here, we have several tropical waves progressing westward along the intertropical convergence zone to the south of Panama and Costa Rica and south of Mexico, as well as the rest of Central America. And none of these are showing any signs of development at this time. As you can see here, the tropical cyclone activity is not expected during the next 48 hours. One final look we'll have is at the Atlantic and Pacific seasons to date. These are the 2012 Tropical Cyclone Advisory Archives, and basically go to this page to get an idea of how many storms and hurricanes have formed so far this year in both the Atlantic and Pacific. And so far we have had 4 named storms in the Atlantic, including 1 hurricane. It was a minimal hurricane, Chris, and that was well off into the Atlantic. Meanwhile, the Eastern Pacific has had 2 hurricanes and 3 named storms, and I believe Carlotta was a major hurricane, or close to a major hurricane at one time. I think it was a Category 2 hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson scale, which means it had winds of just under 110 miles an hour. That was a rapidly intensifying hurricane, and it eventually came ashore along the southern coast of Mexico a few weeks back. So that's basically it for now. We'll have another report tomorrow, but for now, this is Greg Machos for the Hurricaneville Tracking the Tropics report. Hope you have a good day.
This has been Hurricaneville's Tracking the Tropics.